Right. Welcome, everyone. This is session 5. Watch the channel. This session is on side channel analysis, obviously. I'm Aydın Aysu. I'm an assistant professor at North Carolina State University, and I will be chairing this session. We have 3 distinguished papers in this session. And that includes one best paper candidate, which is the first paper that will be presented. We do Control L, and then do this. Okay, go back to first slide, sorry, you get a spoiler. So our first presenter in this session is Mateus, and he will be presenting low latency masking with arbitrary prediction order based on click elements. So Mateus received his engineering degree from École des Mines de Saint-Étienne, France in 2019. He is currently pursuing his PhD in microelectronics at ST Microelectronics, in collaboration with Hubert Korean Laboratory. And his research focuses on the implementation of efficient and secure hardware masking countermeasures.
Thank you, Professor Aysu, for the introduction. My name is Mateus Simões, and the topic of this presentation is low latency masking. It's a joint work of ST Microelectronics and the Hubert Korean Laboratory. So, to give you a flavor of the context and the motivation behind this work, masking is a countermeasure against side channel attacks. And when you talk about masking, we talk about, for example, you have a secret information you want to mask, and then you split this information into several shares, random shares. Then you do computation on the shares, and at the end, after the evaluation, you can recombine the shares to retrieve the secret output. It's a very sound solution against side channel attacks. The more shares you use to mask your device, the more complex it is to attack it. And normally, masking a device increases the number of clock cycles needed to evaluate the function. And an effective masking implementation of the ESS box, one example, takes 8 clock cycles to evaluate the whole S box. However, this implementation is not suitable for unrolled and round-based architectures. For example, if you want to implement the AES on CBC mode. So, this 8 clock cycles masked AES box, it's more used in byte serial cases. So what I want to do here is to implement a low latency implementation of the AES box. And when I say low latency, it's actually a single cycle, clock cycle, to evaluate the whole function. And why does masking increase latency? So if you look at the image, here is the bitwise multiplication masked with 2 shares. So as you can see, you increase the number of logic gates in the circuit, so you have a more complex implementation, increasing the area. You also need to use random number generator to refresh the masks within the calculation. And since time is short, basically you add register barriers to stop glitches, which are source of side channel leakages, these profitable side channel leakages. So the question that guides our work here is how to mask complex circuits with low latency overhead. So to obtain single cycle implementations and secure in the presence of glitches. So this is what I want to answer now. And the solution that we found is very simple. Instead of having a global clock to trigger all the registers in the circuit, we're going to use some kind of handshake logic to trigger each register in the appropriate time. So it's a asynchronous approach. And since we're using a synchronous approach, you have this kind of asynchronous implementation style, which is called the two-phase bundled data asynchronous circuit. When you talk about bundled data, actually it is, you have the sender and the receiver, they exchange some data among them, and bundled with this data, we have two signals, the request and the acknowledgement signal. The request tells me when that data is ready to be evaluated. And acknowledgement signal tells me when data has been evaluated, and can be, and new data can be sent. Two-phase protocol means that it's not the logic level of the handshake logic that tells me in which phase I am, but actually the transition of this handshake logic. So it doesn't matter if it's a positive edge or a negative edge. For example, if you can see, phase 1 means that I have a transition in the request signal, and phase 2 is the transition in the acknowledgement signal. And to manage all this logic, I have these elements. So this is the click element, and as you can see here, I have a fire signal, and this is actually the local clock signal, which I'm going to use to trigger the registers. So, and why did we choose this device to control the handshake logic? It's because we only use normal regular logic gates and a flip-flop to design it. So it's very simple. And so we avoid also using Mueller cells and latches. And it's important to use flip-flops on this case because by using flip-flops, we can apply a static timing analysis to compute the delay among the click elements. And this is important to compute the delay because imagine you have here two registers, and between these registers you have the combinatorial circuit. So you have the propagation delay of this combinatorial circuit. And the delay among the click elements on the request channel has to match the delay of this combinatorial circuit. So basically, you are going to compute the delay of the combinatorial logic, the delay of among the click elements, sorry, minus the delay of the combinatorial logic, and if this delay is positive, the slack has been met, respected, and normally my circuit works. And to do that, we add a chain of buffers among the click elements on the request channel, and we also apply don't-touch constraints on my design to keep the architecture and also the buffers. So to synthesize all this, we use commercial tools. We use basically the design compiler. So this work also helps to bridge the difference between the words of the synchronous and also synchronous word. So I can basically start from secure design, synchronous secure design, apply the click elements to obtain this asynchronous single cycle figure on it, and then synthesize it using an adaptive delay matching technique, which was published 2 years ago. And in this case, I'm going to synthesize in a loop my design until I respect the slack of my implementation. And then I can output the netlists and test it. So to show you some practical results on the AES. So my implementation is globally synchronous, so I still have a clock signal, global clock signal. And only the S-box is asynchronous, has this asynchronous behavior. So the first block of my pipeline is the source block, which produces the handshake logic. Then I have a series of click elements, and the last element of this pipeline is the sync model, which consumes the handshake logic, the handshake signals. So it's actually the clock who triggers this pipeline. And when you look at this, maybe a little bit complex circuit, actually is the Cankun design of the AES box. As you can see, I don't have a global clock anymore. I just have a series of click elements, and each one triggers the local registers on this design. Looking at some implementation results, you spoiled that already, though. So, as you can see, I only compare first order masking, even if our solution is higher order masking protected. I only compare first order masking with low latency, so single cycle evaluation. And as you can see, this solution is the smallest. It's obvious because, not obvious, but since I started from a secure design and I just applied the click elements, which are very simple, the cost of having this solution is actually just adding the click element. So it has a very low cost. The number of randomness used thanks to the domain-oriented masking is relatively low. However, when you look at the frequency here in this case, so you have a very low throughput compared to the state of the art. We are working on that, but for the moment, you have only 30 megahertz as a maximum frequency for 2 shares. And if you compare among those solutions, only 2 of them are secure in high order. So it's Naghmeh and this work. Thanks again to the domain-oriented masking. Thanks to Professor Nagata, yesterday we had a brief introduction to some of us had a brief introduction to the test vector leakage assessment. So to test the security of my implementations, we simulated power traces. So I simulated 2 groups of power traces, one with a fixed input and the second one with a random input. Then I can compare using T-statistics the difference of those groups. And if I'm below a threshold of 4.5, my implementation is secure, let's say. And as you can see, up to 3rd order analysis, the click element, click-based masking, let's say, is secure. This is a univariate configuration. If we do bivariate analysis, you arrive at the same, you have the same conclusion. So in the upper triangle, random number generator is off. In the lower triangle, I'm using random number generator to refresh these masks. This is a 2nd order analysis on a 2nd order masking. And as you can see, using, again, 10 million traces, simulated power traces, it works. It's secure. So to conclude, and some perspectives. So this is, let's say, a generic approach. Actually, it's a design style to implement low latency masking with the order security. So since it's a hardware approach, I can apply it to different designs very effectively. And also, we can synthesize these asynchronous circuits using commercial tools, design compiler, for example. And thanks to the domain-oriented masking, you have arbitrary protection order. Some drawbacks of this solution is the use of set-min delays and don't-touch constraints, and the lower operation frequency, but we are working on that. So it's one of the perspectives, and you want to improve the frequency of this solution and also to implement it on the real test chip. So thank you for your attention. If you have questions, and here's bibliography. Yeah.
We have time for a few questions.
Hi, great talk. So my question is, what is this logic that, what's the acknowledgement logic? When does it send an acknowledgement? You mentioned there's a producer-consumer structure in the design. So the request would be sent, and then is it when it's evaluated is when you send the acknowledgement back?
So yes, the sender sends a request signal.
Okay.
Just telling, now you can, I have a block of data here, and you can treated,
Okay.
evaluated.
Mm-hmm.
Once the evaluation is done, then the receiver sends back this acknowledgement signal. And with this signal, the sender knows that he can output a new data
Got it.
to be evaluated.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so the purpose of having registers in a DOM gadget, apart from just preventing glitches,
Mhm.
is also to maintain the state irrespective of the values of the inputs. So, I mean, there are some papers where they show if you do not have these registers, what might happen is you have something called early propagation. So let's talk about an AND gate. In an
Mhm.
AND gate, if you have a 0 as one of the inputs, before even the other input arrives, it
Mhm.
will send the output out before both the inputs are available.
Mhm.
So why is that a problem? Because then what would happen is, based on the input data, you will see delays that are very, very correlated to the actual input values.
Mhm.
So glitches are one thing, but have you tried to look at the waveforms in your simulated traces? I don't know if you were able to do real evaluations, but did you observe these timing variations because of the input
Yes.
values? Because we want to protect the secret data, right?
Yes. So if data path is large enough, we can see this early propagation effects happen.
I see.
Yes. So, but here, maybe here it's more clear to see. But by using registers, we limitate the data path. So we have synchronization ever small steps, let's say. So this timing difference,
Mm-hmm.
we can't see it, let's say. It's not the case when we use raw array approaches, for example. In this case, we can just remove the registers and suppress glitches, because we don't have glitches anymore with some dual array configurations.
Right, right.
Then we have a large data path without registers.
Okay.
However, since the data path is large,
Okay.
these timing differences are more visible, and we can attack that.
Okay. So it might result in some sort of leakage. If there is an adversary who is stressing on just that one data path and creating those delays which are observable in general.
Yes, sorry, can you repeat?
Okay, so you said you do observe these delays, and there is some sort of a correlation with the input data to that. So that's like a small issue in
Yes,
this.
but I can't observe this in my design, but
Oh,
it
okay.
happens.
I
This
see.
early propagation effect can happen when you use, for example, some dual rail approaches
Okay.
without registers, because basically, and we add registers to stop glitches.
Correct.
But some dual rail approaches, they allow us to eliminate glitches completely.
Okay.
So we can remove, in some cases, registers.
Okay.
But we have this problem of early propagation with
Okay.
within the design. I don't know if it was clear.
Yeah, that's fine. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. I think I had some observation very similar to Anuj, but one thing, how many traces did you evaluate your design on?
At 10 million.
10 million traces, so
Yes.
that's actually pretty good. Because there was something similar that came to mind, because the logic is mostly asynchronous, but not so much because you latch in the middle. And then you're using a very balanced design, like can
Yes.
write. But in asynchronous logic, at some point, we'll have some pattern that is data dependent that will emerge because of the handshake that happens at certain points. So what you are saying here, I think you already responded, just to make sure that we all understand there. So what you're saying here is that you are reducing the amount of asynchronicity by putting these registers in the middle, and then using a balanced logic to begin with. But then you could do more, for example, by having dual rails in the middle to further balance the things. Now, the question is, even though your design seems smaller than others, right? So what is the overhead of all of this?
Of the solution.
Yeah.
So if you look at this lower part of my design, without the pink blocks, this is the original design of the current rights implementation masked with the DOM. So the overhead here, if I understood well your question, is to add those pink blocks to obtain a single cycle increment. Also, one of the overheads too, it's since I have this clock at the input to trigger the pipeline, I have a larger data path at the end. So I have to a larger period. So frequency is lower.
Yeah, but everything is pipeline.
Yeah.
So by the way, the talk was excellent, by the way, so thank you.
Yeah.
Let's take the speaker. Okay. Right. The second talk in this session will be given by Shuohang. Shuohang he has a master's degree, is a master's degree candidate from the School of Integrated Circuits in Tsinghua University, and his research direction is side channel protection technology.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. My name is Shuohang Peng. Welcome to the presentation of our paper, a low-randomness first-order mask Xoodyak. This work was done by the Tsinghua University. Following first, I'm going to introduce the background. Then I'm going to perform a security analysis for documentation of Xoodyak. Then I will talk about how to reduce the randomness securely and efficiently. And finally, I will give the implementation results and the comparison of the Xoodyak. Let me do a brief introduction to the light-weight cryptography and the natural background. In recent years, with the continuous development of IoT technology, the security of IoT device has become an increasing focus. Using light-weight cryptographic algorithm is one solution, as it can potentially provide security at a lower cost than current cryptographic standards. Light-weight cryptography standardization process conducted by NIST aims to select algorithms for authenticated encryption with sorted data. After 3 round evaluation, 10 algorithms became finalists, and among them, Xoodyak is the efficient and compact and competitive algorithm. The core of Xoodyak is a pseudo permutation, which has 384-bit intermediate plates organized by 3 128-bit planes. The x, y, and z coordinates of the of the intermediate is shown as the top. There are 5 steps in this permutation. The first one is theta, which makes different plans together, and the second one is row s, which shifts plan 1 and plan 2. And the third one is eta, which adds the round constant. And the first one is chi, which is a nonlinear operation. And the last one is row is, which shifts plan 1 and plan 2 again. The security of the cryptographic device is seriously threatened by the side channel attack. Side channel attack refers to the use of inadvertent physical information leakage, such as power consumption, electromagnetic radiation, and execution time difference by the adversary to completely or partially recover the secret key. Among its attack, differential power analysis is the powerful attack. Resistance to side channel attack is an essential evaluation metric during the election process. Domain order masking is an effective countermeasure against the DPA. For the disorder secure DOM, every sensitive variable is divided into D+1 shares, and the shares with the same sex number are grouped into the same domain. For the 2 input AND gates, the DOM AND gate use one random number gamma to ensure security of the cross terms. The security of the masking scheme is mostly evaluated using the probing model. In this model, the adversary can obtain information at the probed place, and for hardware, the glitch at the output of the gate will propagate with driven gate. This leads to the introduction of the gate-extended probing model. In this model, the probe placed at the output of the probed gate will obtain the information at the input of the combinational logic circuit driving the input of the probed gate. And we use this model as our security evaluation model. Now I'm going to talk about the second part, analyze for mutation of Xoodyak. The design of the Xoodyak is inspired by the Kayak P, and their round functions are similar. Therefore, the flay in the mutation of Kayak may occur in the mutation of Xoodyak. Let's recall this problem. As an example, for the bit A304, the two shares of this bit will transform from theta, then to rho, and then to pi. And finally, they will appear in the dual multiplier for the bit 410, which leaks the information of the bit 304 under the glitch extended probing model. Therefore, we need to check every cross term of the dual mutation of Xoodyak to ensure security. Oops, sorry. We need to derive the coordinate expression of the intermediate state after passing through theta, rho west, and eta to verify the relationship between input bits of the input bits coordinate between entering the chi-cross terms. And after derivation, we can see that for the B0 operation, the x and z coordinates of input bits in this cross term are different, thus guaranteeing that the two shares of the same bit will not overlap in this cross term. And similarly, for another cross term in B0 operation, and we can see that the x and z coordinates are also different, thus guarantee that the two shares of the same bit will not overlap in this cross term. And for B1 operation, after derivation, the z coordinate is different. And for B2 operation, we can see that the x coordinate is different. Therefore, at least one coordinate of all 6 cross terms is different, thus guaranteeing that all cross terms will not overlap the two shares of the same bit. Now I'm going to talk about the third part, reduce randomness. For the normal dual mutation of Xoodyak, we need 384 bit randomness every cycle. However, the applicability of the state-of-the-art randomness reduction technique needs to be carefully analyzed. Changing of the guard is not trivial for the first-order dual mutation due to the different purpose of using randomness. No randomness trick is practical. However, it will be explained in the following. The linear operation in the algorithm cannot guarantee the security of this trick. In different round, we cannot analyze directly using the glitch extended probing model since the register between different rounds will prevent the propagation of the glitches. However, considering that the linear operation and the nonlinear operation in the algorithm can cause changes in the coordinate of the intermediate states, we can transform this problem into an arrangement and the combinational problem of the coordinate transformations. Since the algorithm usually contains only one nonlinear operations, for the algorithm with alpha linear operations, we only need to consider alpha plus 1 operations in the algorithm. And in every operation, it contains several coordinate transformations. When executing round function n times, the transformation process is equivalent to extract continuously and uniformly n times alpha plus 1 coordinate transformations from TNL and TLG. A possible scenario is that the bit returns to its original position after performing the round function n times. For Xoodyak, the coordinate transformation only happens in theta rho west and rho east. Since theta will mix different plane together, we only need to consider x and z coordinates. And the transformation is done by the modular addition. After iterating the above times n times, we can get the equivalent system at the lower right, which means that the bit in the intermediate state of Xoodyak returns to its original position. We exhaustively search solutions that satisfy the equivalent system and find that the solution appears when the algorithm executed to round 4. We give one solution for illustration. We rewrite the doom expression using no randomness trick. After performing the transformation shown above, For the Chi operation in round 4, the 2 shares of plan 1 in this round will both contains the 2 shares of plan 2 in round 1. This means that the DOM input is no longer independent of each other. For the normal DOM mutation, we need to add fresh randomness every round like this. However, the coordinate overlapping only happens in the certain round. Therefore, we can use it to avoid any randomness every round. Now we only need to add fresh randomness in the round before the coordinate overlapping, since the subsequent operation will make different randomness of different coordinates together, which guarantees the independence. Thus, we can reduce the DOM mutation, the randomness of the DOM mutation to 1 over n minus 1 of the normal DOM mutation. And for Xoodyak, this means that we can reduce the randomness by a factor of 3. Now I'm going to talk about the last part, result. The architecture of the unprotected DOM mutation is shown at the top. Instead of extracting terminal state from the permutation and absorbing with return data, we directly import the data into the permutation for absorption, thus saving the resource overhead between the intermediate state and the external data. The protected implementation is shown at the bottom. A register is added to Chi to mitigate the impact of glitches, which also replace the original state register. And the linear operation are executed on 2 shares called DOMIN1 and DOMIN0 by duplicated the same circuit. TVLA is used to evaluate the potential leakage of our implementation. First, we disable the PRNG and collect 10,000 power trees, and the red dashed lines are the threshold. And the result shows that our implementation have large first-order leakage after mask removal. Then we enable the PRNG and collect 10 million trees, and the result shows that our 2 first-order implementations show no first-order leakage. Then we do the second-order TVLA on 10 million trees, and the result shows that our implementation show large second-order leakage. The table is the result of the IPJ implementations. According to the requirement by the GMU, we choose RTAG7 and the Spectrum 7 IPJs as the target device. First, to provide the cost due to the SA countermeasures, we provide different implementation we proposed. And it can be seen that the SA countermeasures increase the resource overhead by a factor of 5 on average, while the maximum frequency decreased by 38% on RTAG7 and 15% on Spectre 7. And for the unprotected implementation compared to 6 and 7, our implementation reduced resource overhead by 41% to 44%, while the maximum frequency increased by 48% to 62%. And for the protected version, our implementation reduced resource overhead by 19% to 40%, while the maximum frequency increased by 8.7% to 9.3%. ASIC performance is also an evaluation metric during the election process. We evaluate our design with 4 different technologies. First, to provide the cost due to the ASIC countermeasures, we compare the different implementation we proposed. And it can be seen that the protected implementation consumes 3.13 times to 4.24 times more area than the unprotected implementation. And under the 65 nanometer process node, the area of the unprotected implementation is 5 times smaller than the unprotected implementation in 8, while the maximum frequency is increased by 19%. And for the protected implementation, our protected implementation is still 16% to 25% smaller than the unprotected implementation in 8, while the maximum frequency is almost unchanged. Under the 28 nanometer process node, our implementation is 4 times smaller than 8, while the maximum frequency is 5.7 times faster. And for the protected version, our implementation is still 14% to 25% smaller than the 8, and the maximum frequency is 5.6 times faster. In this work, our contribution are threefold. First, we perform an evaluation for mutation of Xoodyak. Second, we propose a technique to reduce the randomness. And third, we design the first-order DPA scale mutation of Xoodyak. Third, we designed the first RDB implementation of Xoodyak on 277 PGs and ASIC technologies. The countermeasure the cost due to countermeasure is analyzed. That brings me to the end of my talk. If you have any question, you are welcome to contact me. Thank you for your attention and hope you have a nice day.
We have time for a few questions. Let me ask the first question. So there is a lot of recent work on coming up with proofs for side channel security, right, under some context. So your security evaluation, is that just depending on your empirical analysis, or do you have some provable guarantees or some proofs in your solution?
You mean the security of our implementation?
Yes.
It's due to the security of the DOOM and for the less randomness implementation, the security is due to the analysis we do the sorry. I think the security. I think the security due to the DOOM implementation and the analysis we did, and the randomness and the less randomness implementation, the security and it is also based on our analysis.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. Any other questions, please? Right. Let's thank the speaker again. Right, the last talk of this session will be provided by Sofiane. It's on security order of gate-level masking schemes. Sofiane has a PhD in secure implementations and physical attacks from Telecom Paris. He joined Secure IC in 2016 as a PhD student and R&D engineer in charge of the analysis of the cryptographic implementation against physical attacks. He is now in charge of the secure design and advanced cryptography program.
Thank you, Adin, for this presentation, introduction. So, Sofiane Takarabt, I represent our work in collaboration with our colleagues from Maryland University and Telecom Paris. So actually it's about the security order of masking scheme in general, but we will make our use case on a small implementation on present. So I start with small introduction to introduce a little bit the masking scheme and the attack threats. So generally what we are targeting in physical attacks are the power consumption or electromagnetic emanation. There is some passive attacks or active attacks, namely we use CPA templates, and for secure leakage assessment, we use NICV or T-test. The most used countermeasure is masking, as presented by my previous speakers. For the masking scheme, what we use generally is N shares or D shares to protect against D-1 order attack. Okay, so in masking scheme, protecting linear functions is easier. Let's say it's easy. We need just to repeat the same data path twice or three times the same. And the more challenging part is the nonlinear functions or ASPOCs in general. So in masking implementation, the suggestion is very rare. This is why it's studied for more than 10 years, but there is some issues with the implementations of nonlinear gates, namely because of physical defaults in general or glitches due to propagation time. And for that, we have some good solutions, okay? Namely, we have the first one, which is threshold implementation, and also the domain-oriented masking. So the threshold implementation consists on, let's say, the first properties, which is the most important one, which is the non-completeness, where each function should be independent from at least one shape in the case of first-order implementation. And if we compare with the domain-oriented masking, it's almost the same. We need just to be non-complete at each stage of the pipeline, okay? So we make the sharing, and then each gate should be independent statistically from one share at least. So that's good. In threshold implementation or domain-oriented masking, it's formally proved that those implementations are secure in the probing model, which is a powerful model. It is very, in this model, actually, we consider a very powerful attacker, which consists on probing the internal signal of the circuits, okay? So it's very accurate measurements, and the secret is retrieved by recombination of those probe signals. So if you look to the image, in the left, we have the probing model, and on the right, we have the normal attacker, let's say passive attacker that just probe the electromagnetic emanation or the power consumption. But in this model, actually, we don't target one signal, but we recombine the power consumption of the different gates, the different signals propagating through the different internal signals, and generally we'll model this as the Hamming weight, or in some case, the Hamming distance, which is more faithful to the real power consumption. So in this case, we ask the question, which kind of information that can be recombined with this right probe, okay? And what we observed, actually it's obvious that in the Hamming weight leakage model, we can see that the least significant bit of this information is exactly the unmasked value. So if we compute the least significant of the Hamming weight, it will be exactly x0, which is the unmasked value, okay? So, and somehow we just with the Hamming weight, computing the Hamming weight, checking the parity of the Hamming weight, it reveals the least significant bit of our secret value. So this is what we illustrate in this table. So you have the secret value 0101 that may be shared with the columns. And then if we compute the Hamming weight and check the parity, we have exactly the same parity as the secret value, okay? So that's problem actually for masking schemes. It seems that masking is not working, but in real measurements, we don't have such accurate information. So we have first order leakage with one probe. If we consider that first order attack is just with one probe, then the parity of the Hamming weight reveals the secret value. In reality, what we have is floating point measurements. We cannot check easily the parity of our signals, but we can ask the question, how can we exploit this kind of leakage? Okay, so for this, actually, we have implemented a first-order protected present S box. We based our implementation on the threshold principles, which are, as I said, non-completeness, uniformity, and the correctness. Uniformity is ensured at the inputs, X, Y, Z, and W, and the outputs, 4 shares also for each bit, X prime into Y prime. So actually we have different implementations where we make sure to ensure this uniformity property, which is not obvious once we have a non-complete sharing. So we have different implementations with, actually we have at the end the same results, but actually it varies a little bit, but we get the same result always. Okay. So this is the area consumption for our implementation, but this is not the important things for our contributions. We didn't look for more optimization, so it's basic implementation based on threshold properties. So first, we show our results on synthetic traces or theoretical-based traces on the Hamming weight leakage model. So if we represent the leakage when we vary the key at the input of the S box, of the present S box, so we have the message XORed with the key, and we compute the Hamming weight at the output of the S box for each secret value, okay? So for each key, we have a pattern that is different from key 0 until key 15. So this tells to us there is a dependency between this distribution and the key. So we can extract the key, and we observe that actually this leakage, the location of this leakage, the output of the S box, is actually distributed differently from X to another X. Okay. So how can we model this? It's normally multivariate Gaussian or a Gaussian mixture distribution, and we can represent this leakage as the sum of clusters, okay, with different weight. So the weight depends only on the structure of the S box, okay? We cannot just compute a general formula for the whole S boxes. It depends how many shares we have at the output, the internal implementation, and so many other parameters. So what we can conclude from this distribution is the mean of the power consumption is the same over the whole 16 distributions. So the first order attack usually used is not successful. The second order attack that exploits the variance should succeed because the variance for each secret value is different. So this is what we expect. And for higher order, it depends if the distribution is symmetric or different compared with the normal distribution for each cluster. Okay, so in this implementation, what we get, so we model our leakage like the Gaussian mixture, and for each key hypothesis, we compute the likelihood, okay, or the log likelihood to avoid the rounding in the computation, okay, and then to see the convergence of the likelihood, we compute the normalized one to be more easy to see the convergence more clearly. So what we can see is after only 200 traces, we recover the right key. And the curve of the success rate here is extracted from the likelihood formula. So we compute the likelihood for a key divided by the sum of all the likelihoods. Okay, so it's probability computation. We can normalize, and then we get directly this success rate curve without repeating the attack many times. And you can see that we reach almost 100% success rate after 400 traces. Okay, compared with high order CPA or MCDPA, we compute with SNR 25% to be more close to the HSPICE traces, and we can see that, as expected, the second order works, the first order fails. As expected, the third order fails, and the fourth order succeed. Okay, so the third order fails because the distributions are symmetric, actually for each secret value. So actually, we perform these attacks, okay, template-based attack and MCDPA on theoretical traces, FPGA simulated traces, on digital, static leakage, dynamic leakage, and we get always the same result after a few traces depending on the noise, we recover the secret key. So you can see we have almost the same result on HSpice traces. On MCDPA, we have the second order that works, the third order is not working, and the fourth order is working. And also in electromagnetic-based attacks, we have more noise, so we need, for sure, we need more traces, and we achieve the attack only on 10,000 traces, okay? This is the MCDPA, the convergence of the MCDPA also for the different orders. We have the same behavior, which means that we have an intrinsic internal behavior of our implementation. So as a conclusion, we mentioned LSB leakage that we actually identified in previous publications, and now we show that this leakage can be exploited by advanced template-based attacks. So the only problem in real measurements is just the precision, okay? So using the advanced template attack, we can be more efficient than high-order DPA, okay, based on the right clustering and computing correctly the beans. We can be more efficient and ask the question if our implementation is secure as expected or not. And as a last observation, we noted that our model is probably a model that combine the power consumption of the different functions. So maybe a good protection is just to move some blocks to separate the different shares in the chip to avoid this combination. And so that's all. Thank you for attention.
We have some time for questions. So let me start with the question. So using this new analysis that you show, can you break the earlier two papers that were presented in this session?
Yeah, so what we showed here is a use case on threshold implementation, which is secure by design, which is very, let's say, good protection. Our attack that we showed here is general for any masking scheme. I didn't suppose that here is a DOM or a TI or any other secure gadgets that we can find in state-of-the-art, just mathematical computation on the masking formula, power consumption, parity of the leakage model, and it should work, yeah.
The earlier presenters, do you have a rebut? Okay. Any other questions? Right. In that case, let's thank the speaker once more. So these are the all three talks in this session. So the session is a